bank and the bug.
There you go. Hey, Greg.
Okay.
Mr. Ron Yarbrough and Cricket Staggs, we want to welcome you to the very first episode of the Bank and the Bug. Cricket, how did you come up with that name, the Bank and the Bug?
I'm named after a bug, and you work at a bank. It wasn't difficult for us. But maybe I could lean up against you and you lean up against me, and that way we don't have to sleep with our heads in the mud, is what I was thinking. So I've got a buddy of mine, Mike, that does the Pools and Ponds podcast, because I've got ponds out here and he's got pools up there in the city, right? So he stays up there and I stay out here in the country, and I work the lake and he works the city, and I stay out of the concrete. He stays out of the water. He gets a little confused in the river, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So Pools and Ponds podcast, so Bank and Bug, why not?
All right.
But this is something I need to have. I'm just having fun conversations with Mike, and it kind of goes into conversations about real estate. But really, again, this is going to be 5 to 10 minutes of amazing content. What we're here to talk about today is we don't want to say, hey, here's what a house is, or here's the basics of a mortgage or whatever. We can get into that, and we're here as experts. Ron's the mortgage expert. I'm the real estate expert. But what we're here to talk about today is equity. Ron, what is equity?
Well, equity is in my world, equity is a number that is just a fictitious number that you can put on your balance sheet unless you actually put that money to work for you. It's an actual bank account that your house holds.
Okay.
And throughout history, and I've been in the business 30 plus years, and a lot of people have learned how to use their house as an ATM, which is not necessarily a good thing. But taking your equity and using that equity for positive wealth management is a fantastic thing. So, and we've had a lot of, right now, I believe the country is at an all-time high of the amount of equity that's built up in the country. So,
right. So when we say equity, of course, what we're talking about in the specific sense, and to give a definition just to start at the basics, is the amount of value of any particular piece of property. For example, we're using property now, but you can have equity in your car, you can have equity in your TV, or my guitar, I own it outright, so I got full equity there. If I owed $100 on it, then that would go against my equity value. And so the equity is the amount of value that you have that you're sitting on in your home. For example, the guy I spoke to, probably right over your shoulder past that condo complex, he called me and he said, I've got a house and I own it. It's probably worth $500,000. I don't owe anything on it. I want to sell it, and what he said is I want to rent it and I want to make some money on it, and I've got some equity in it, and I want to know what to do with it, right? So that's the question, is when people have equity, what do? I want to unpack some of the things you said there. You mentioned using your home as an ATM, and you mentioned sidelong, of course, the expert advice is to do not use your home as an ATM. That's not wise. So to explain that, if you take out a $100,000 mortgage and you add $10,000 worth of furniture onto that mortgage somehow, which would be a hard thing to do, but if you were to get it done, you actually pay back $270,000 in total on that mortgage, and you would have paid back $240,000 in total if you had not borrowed also on the furniture. So the math difference is $30,000 that you paid back for $10,000 that you borrowed, where sometimes, again, you could have saved up and sat on beanbags for a couple of years and had chairs and stuff for a lot cheaper. So again, to let Ron come back to anything that I didn't unpack appropriately, don't use your home as an ATM. But what we're talking about is whether or not you have equity in your home, whether or not you can use that equity in your home, whether or not you should use that equity in your home, and specifically how you would do so. And we're not here to talk about all of that today, but touch on some of the things there.
Well, one of the things that I've tried to coach a lot of my customers over the last 30 years on, especially first-time home buyers, and I would say at least half of those first-time home buyers did listen to me, and they've been lifelong customers. But one advantage you have in the tax law is once you've owned a property for 2 years, after 2 years, any money you make on that property when you sell it is a tax-free gain, as long as you continue to live in that house at least 2 out of the last 5 years. You made $300,000 profit on your house. That's a tax-free income check to you. You can take that money, you can reinvest it in a larger home to live in. You can take a portion of that money and invest it in other good, sound investments. Not necessarily the stock market, but other real estate, other fixed investments to pay you a good positive rate of return. you can take that equity and put it to work for you and basically build a retirement plan from the equity in your home. And the younger you start, of course, the better that's going to be when you get closer to retirement age. But the amount of tax-free for a house that you live in growth is outstanding. Now, when you diverse into equity in real estate investment and second home stuff, we have tax advantage, leverage for those. It's called a 1031 exchange, where you can, leverage your tax situation by reinvesting into other properties and that kind of stuff. But
yeah, you got to reel that back about a mile and a half. So we're here to talk about equity. And of course, yes, you're going to lose some equity if you've got to give it to the man for taxes. And there's ways to fix that. Forgive my dog. She's got asthma or something. She was hacking. So I just figured I'd collect her and let you know why there was a honking sound going on the other side of the screen here.
Yeah, we'll have to do another podcast just on the dog. I bet it has more views.
Yes, she's famous. We've had her on Color 10 or KY3 or whatever. So equity, building equity then. So if you're a first-time home buyer, you're going to see equity as a savings account on a home that you're a savings account that you're building. If you're a investor, you're going to see that equity again as a savings, a place that you've put your funds, right? So like let's use my story, for example. I was a renter, right? So I had no equity in my home, nothing. My equity was that I got to live there and I had a lease, right? So I was paying $900 a month for the rent, and the landlord came to me. He was the local real estate agent. He said, "Hey, I'm going to need to sell your house, so be prepared for showings." And I said, "Oh no, I don't want you to sell my house." And he said, "Well, I got to sell it, so be prepared for showings." And I said, "Well, is there any way I can avoid that?" And he said, "Well, you could buy it." And I said, "The common things that buyers normally say, that renters normally say is, well, I don't have enough money." And he said, "Well, how's that?" I said, "Well, I don't have the down payment." He said, "Oh, well, you can get a loan nowadays that doesn't necessarily require down payment. I just might have to cover some costs for you." And I didn't understand that necessarily, but he had a banker that did, and he introduced me. And that's really one of the ways that I got into the real estate business, was from understanding that from that perspective, because I literally went from, you're paying $900 a month. And again, what I said is, well, I can't afford the mortgage payment. He said, "Well, no, it would be about a $900 a month payment for your mortgage too." And I said, "Well, again, I don't have the down payment." He said, "You don't need that." And I said, "Well, I don't have the credit." He said, "Well, there's not actually a minimum credit score for a USDA loan. It's a minimum credit score for the particular bank that we're going to use." And I happened to slide right through with a pretty low credit score, frankly. So again, I went from pay me a rent payment and you're be prepared for showings to the very next first of the month, I was paying a mortgage payment on my own home. That was in 2008. So tough time, you may recall, for the world. That's why he was selling.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. So I bought a home in 2008 for $130,000. And then here, not too long ago, it was 2018 or 19, I think. I owed 110,000, right? Something like that. And I was able to tap into the equity of that mortgage. And I had, again, it was equity. I just borrowed like 170 on the home. It's worth like 210. So borrowed like 170 and tapped into the equity to do a bunch of remodel in the places I wanted to do it to the home, right? And that was just one of many different directions that I could go, as you know, and as we're getting ready to talk about. But and it may or may not have been a good idea. But tapping into that equity is the suggestion that we're making, and not necessarily to buy or sell. But if you've got equity, that's definitely the next step to look at, because there's lots of reasons why you might want to transfer that equity to a new home, even at a different or higher interest rate. I refinanced again, it would have been 3.5%, 4%, something like that. If I were to refinance today, I'm sure it would be a higher rate. It's almost going to be double that. But there could be a lot of reasons to do so, like that big backyard for the dogs that I don't have, or kids have moved away. What are some of the reasons you have, Rob?
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of life events. People will get to be my age, since I'm there now. But and they're like, my house is too big. I need to downsize a little bit. I'm getting ready to get, I'm not personally, but they're getting ready to go on to a fixed income of some sort. They want to make sure that their expenses they can afford. There's all kinds of reasons that people will need to leave. And I'd say on on a national average, it's gone up a little bit, but it tends to be less than 5 or 6 years is about the life of typical mortgages, whether they refinance their mortgage or they go and they buy a new property or whatever. But the average length of a mortgage is around 5 or 6 years today. It's kind of creeping up a little bit now because of the low rate environment we had previously, which is starting to filter out. But people just don't. I think I've bought 3 forever houses.
Right. Yeah. No, you don't want to do that, especially not if it's your first one. Nobody buys their forever house as their first house. You remember your first girlfriend? You remember your first car?
I do, because I've only dated 2 people, so there you go. That's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, I remember my first car too. I didn't want it to be my last car. So you make some mistakes on your first one, but you try and make as few as possible. So if you're lucky enough as a consumer out there and you're watching this and you're lucky enough to have a home and you've bought it like I did back in 2008, and now you're working through what to do or how to use that equity or whatever. Maybe you're just sitting on it, right? Like the guy that he just paid the mortgage off, right? He was trying to plan out what to do because he was thinking maybe he would rent it to nightly rentals because, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month you can make in nightly rentals on the lakefront. So I gave him some different advice, and he ended up buying some long-term rentals and selling that lake house. But that's a different story for a different day. The point is, if you're watching this today, statistically, if you bought a home 5 years ago, you've had in Missouri, statistically, a 55% on average increase in the value of your home, the equitable value of your home. So that means that you've built a bunch of equity, and the question is, what do you do with it, right? So what do you think? Bankers and realtors are just going to tell you to go and spend it, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of times we do, but me personally, the way I like to do business is I keep it more of a mortgage coaching type financial coach. I feel like one thing I learned 30 plus years ago is I am probably taking care of one of the largest investments that most every American will ever have, and that's your house.
Right.
And a lot of consumers don't really realize that first house that they're buying is, in fact, an investment. And it is, because they're paying down on it in principal each month. They're gaining a little bit through,
right.
Through amortization, and then they're gaining equity through appreciation, which is a fantastic thing.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I feel like, being able to manage that equity and manage that largest investment for consumers is what's made me so successful. I try to stay away from buying all these crazy fintech company leads all the time. I don't buy any of that kind of stuff. I try to just help consumers and build a business that way. So.
Well, that makes sense. That's, resolving concerns is kind of what we do. And that's actually where a lot of our income and is derived from. And a lot of our business and work is derived from, as you mentioned. I think using stories is what helps consumers the most understand, like somebody who's watching right now that might say, well, why in the world would I want to move away from this rate and this equity that I've built and all that stuff, right? And just understanding some of the steps that you could be missing that you're also throwing money away at. So I'm going to give a story. And again, I'm sure you've got stories. We don't use names or anything in those stories. But again, the idea is to give you an understanding of why you might do something like that. Like if you take out a mortgage and on your lake house, and now you've got some equity built in it from 10 years and so on and so forth. And the rate's not magnificent, but it's not what it is now. And why in the world would you finance? And in the same breath, you say, but I just signed my kid up for college and I'm paying for all that, and we can't even find a rental, and so on and so forth. And now we're looking at paying $2,000 a month for rent for him if we can find a spot. In the meantime, he's going to be in dorms and so on and so forth. And you can take a chunk of your equity, sir, possibly, and go buy a home for him in that area, right? Have him help you to pay it or pay it yourself, right? And then sell it when he's done with college. That's just a very short version of a very long plan that's easy to lay out, that involves Ron here in front of you and your banker and your realtor, the bank and the bug both, right? We got to help you with that, but we can set you up, and you may end up with a higher mortgage number, but you certainly won't end up with throwing all of that money away on rent, and you won't end up with all the frustrations that you might have by not having the situation that you wanted for the kid in college. And that's just one version of why you would do something like that today.
Yeah, and if you don't have enough equity to pay cash completely for it, you can use in mortgages in the secondary market, you can use a secured down payment as funds for a down payment on a home. And you can do it as an owner occupied transaction if it's your child that's going to be living in that house. Right. So if you do the math, which it would take a while to actually show you the math, but if you do the math, you basically could have your child live in college when you turn around and sell that house in hopefully 4 years, if he doesn't get sidetracked and do a double 6-year college thing. But in 4 years, you can sell that house and basically live there for free.
Yep. And the whole thing ends up being a forced savings account. That's one of the things I liked about my mortgage that I didn't realize until I had it, is that it was a forced version of savings account. Even if the equity wasn't building, I would still be building a portion of that. The funds that I'm paying in are going into the home. When I bought my home, as you know, 2008, the market was still on its way down when I bought. And it actually appraised for a little bit less than what we'd agreed to, if I remember correctly. And he ended up coming down on the price, right? So it was one of those situations that you get into when the market's on its way down. And again, when I bought it at 130, it's appreciated now to about 200. So that's 50%, 55% over that same term of years. I would not have stuck that money into a savings account. I would not have it, right? So even without that appreciation, that'd still be 15 or 20 grand in savings. Just do the math on a $900 rent. If half that went to a savings account instead, or even 10% of it went to a savings account instead, it would be a chunk of money in my pocket. So it's forced savings. Very nice. Very nice. What are the reasons do you have?
I've known very few situations where if you had a $900 a month rent, it didn't stay there for 5 years either, which is something else you need to consider when you're renting. If you're going to stay in a place for 5+ years, it's better to buy than to rent, just because of the simple fact that rent can go up 5% a year. It could go up 10% a year.
Well, that was one of the things that was a beauty of buying the house. The one worry that I had is, what if the economy crashes? And the one thing that the mortgage guy said that made sense to me is, well, we're setting you up on $900 a month. What's your rent now? And I said, $900 a month. He said, okay, so now you're going to have that rent secured in that house, and nobody can tell you to leave. And you've got it set for 30 years. So even if the market continues down, and say in 10 years, which it won't be, cricket, but if in 10 years your house is only worth 60 grand, people are probably still going to need the rent that they need, aren't they? Do you see rent numbers going down? And that made sense. And you're sure enough, man, you cannot rent I got 1,800 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. You can't rent that in Lebanon for under $1,500 a month.
Yeah.
You can get it for 1,100 square feet in a townhouse across town for $1,400 a month right now. So you can't touch these numbers. Speaking of numbers, you got any numbers hiding back there in the back of the screens you want to go over? I know you love the numbers, and I like to explain what they mean.
Well, I think I'll put the property appreciation up on the screen, which I thought, well, that's for the next 5 years. Where did my one?
So that was the actual cost appreciation calculator that you've mentioned. It's an ingenious little device.
Yeah, I've got, I can't remember which one that was. There's home equity. Let me see. That's this.
Because, of course, from this conversation, consumers might want to calculate how much equity they have without any cost to them or obligation to do anything with it, right? So we've got that available to them. They might want to discuss some of the other reasons why they might want to capture or use some of that equity currently. And then, of course, they might want to discuss the actual appreciation values and what we think is going to happen in the future, because, of course, they're guesses. But we've got some educated guesses based on history as to what's going to happen in the future, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, if you look at this nationwide map, which, I am a nationwide lender, so I can help consumers. If you got a consumer that's in, let's say Arizona right now, they've had 76% appreciation in their property values in the last 5 years. So if they wanted to tap in and buy a house down here at the lake, they could do that with just the amount of equity they've grown in their house. But But in Missouri, you can see we went up 55.9%, Kansas 50.79. Our little midsection of the country has been very stable at pretty close to 11% appreciation over the last 5 years.
And those numbers jive with what I'm familiar with. 5 years ago, when I started in the real estate business, the average price per square foot versus the average now adds up to about the same 50 to 60% increase in our zip codes here.
But let's go back in time. We won't really focus too much on this, but this is a really surprising number. Let's click on since 1991 and show you that. And that includes that period of time where we actually lost value in homes back in 2006 and 8, through 8. This since 1991, Missouri's had a 254% increase. Now, the reason I like to bring that up is, I don't know. I love, in the restaurant business and stuff from my past, I love talking to older people. We used to have conversations about real estate and everything else. Well, I bought my first house for $15,000. Well, that just sounds like a story, but that's a true story, because if you go back and you look, if you bought a house, in 1991.
I just did the math. If you bought a house in 1991, if it's worth $250,000 today, a 91, 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a basement, that's going to be a $250,000 house today on 4 acres, something like that, right? The numbers say that you'd have bought it for about 98 back then, and that's almost exactly right.
Isn't that something? It's just amazing.
Well, I don't want to talk about how you got so much better of an opportunity there, Pops, to capitalize on this equity. Let's talk about the future. Well, what's it going to do? So normally consumers are worried that there's going to be some type of a bubble and that bubble's going to burst and they're going to end up on the wrong side of it. I think I mentioned that even if the bubble bursts tomorrow, if you own a house now, you're in good shape and you're going to be in good shape and you've got a great mortgage and all that stuff. But obviously looking at these numbers, it doesn't look like there's any bubble bursting here anytime soon. The 55% number is a lot lower than some of those other states.
So, without going into too much detail about a bubble, the last bubble we had was created by the oversupply of homes.
Yeah.
And, all the housing studies and stuff that I've been involved in, especially down here in the Lake area,
yep.
We're currently around 7,000 or 8,000 homes short of just what the actual demand is currently.
Yep.
7,000 or 8,000 homes short. The amount of new construction that's going on is very limited. So there's really no supply coming. So there's no way that we can have a housing bubble until the supply goes above demand.
National Association of Realtor Statistics agree. 39% fewer homes for sale now than in 2018. New listings dropped 23% year over year, pulling the number of homes on the market down to 39% less compared to the same period 5 years ago, according to analysts nationally in Inland.
And that's our next topic I really want us to make sure we focus on is the fact that there's a lot of people that have bought a house 5 years ago that really are afraid to sell their home because of whatever reason, and they need to move up. But anyway, the appreciation in just, your neck of the woods down there in Lebanon, Laclede County, if you look at I just did a 5.5% appreciation number, and then the other two data points aren't really too accurate because you already saw that it was around 11% over the last 5 years. But if you look at the appreciation for, say, a $450,000 home, you buy that today, in 5 years, that house will be worth $588,000. So that's $138,000 in appreciation in 5 years.
Right. And of course, you can't, the statistics from the past aren't a reliable model for the future necessarily. So even if you were to reduce those numbers by a large percentage to stay on the safe side in calculation, that's still a very large increase in home value.
Right.
The Real Estate Association members will tell you that we want to see a statistical number somewhere in the 3 to 5% per year appreciation for your property, right? So that's still 15 to 25% over a 5-year period.
And we can do I'll put in I should have done more calculators, but I was rushed into trying to get that all done. But
Oh, sure you were, buddy. So
we'll go into, let's go into Laclede, Missouri. And let's just do your median house, your starting home price, according to the national data, in your area is around 215,822. We're going to put zero down today, and we're going to put in $3,000 in closing costs. And let's take a look at the numbers on that in 5 years. And I'll put in a forecasted rate of 4% appreciation and do the math. When you do the math on that, you're looking at, 215. You start off at your 215 value. In 5 years, you got $262,580. Now that's just equity growth through appreciation only. That doesn't count the amortization of your loan. So every month when you make a house payment, a portion goes to the principal balance of that loan.
Right.
So you have actually more equity than that. But just in the investment side of it itself, that's what, 215,822 minus the 262,580. That's well, no, I did that math wrong. Did you do the math?
No, I was just faking.
580 minus 215,822. So that's $46,758 in just a house appreciation equity. Divide that by 5, and that's $9,351 a year that house made you.
All right. So a couple wrap ups, because you don't want this to be a 40-minute video. You may or may not know just how much equity you actually have right now. If you're not out there building equity, you need to be out there building equity. If you'd like more information about how much equity you have without any obligation to do anything, you have 2 characters in front of you who are certainly willing and able to do that. We know all of the other people through the process, so we'd be able to help you through all those steps in the process. But remember, if the best advice for you as a consumer is to stay right where you are and do exactly what you're doing, that's what we're going to tell you, because Ron and I just operate that way, and we'd like to walk past you in the restaurant and say hello. And be able to smile and know that we did our jobs right for you. And everybody's situation is different, so call us with your situations. I think we'll have some options for links or QR codes or something here in the podcast links or whatever, if you're looking at our smiling faces. What else do you have to wrap things up with, Ron?
No, not much, but I would ask you to try to subscribe to the channel so that you can get, you'll get alerted to our new podcast. And there's a lot of information on mine, and hopefully we can get Cricket to upload on his page as well, so that we can get this message out to people. And I would highly recommend you reach out to a real estate professional, whether it be Cricket, myself, or somebody else. But they need to be somebody that's a professional, that's been in the market for a while, to help you. And don't go out on the internet and try to get all your information from the internet, because the internet's there for one purpose only, and that's just to sell. And sell and sell and resell. And I don't know about you, Cricket, but I get over 400 messages a day in my inbox. And I've tried to unsubscribe, and I can't. It just won't go away.
Well, I listened to a video that you had the other day, and what you'd said, I really liked it. You said you need a professional that's been in the business for a minute. Then you followed that right up with, or has great mentors. And that's exactly true. Everybody's new at some point, but even when I was new, I had fantastic mentors over my shoulder, and I was not afraid to go to them, because I was a great agent, and I am a great agent, right? This is not the point where we toot our own horns necessarily, but that's the whole point, is that as a consumer, you have a right to hire the people that will work best to do the job for you. So you need to hire people that you can trust at a price that you can afford to help you with the products that you need. And kind of need to do that in that order, right? Find people that you can trust, have them help you through the process, and that way you get the things that you need. Ron and I subscribe to this theory that one of these great salespeople taught us a long time ago in some book somewhere, that was I think Zig Ziglar, right? Anything that you need in life, you can get by giving all those people around you the things that they need, and everything you need comes to you.
Right.
So see you guys for the next one, right?
Yeah. You give people what they need or what they want, and you will get everything you want. So
that's how we know people will be back for more of this, the bank and the bug.
All right. Well, I appreciate it.
All right, buddy. Talk to you soon.